Calling to order the City of Keystone Heights Budget and Finance Committee meeting. Today is Monday, October 24th. Ms. Rakowski, will you call roll, please?
We have Mayor Lake.
Here.
Councilman Tony Brown.
Here.
All right. And then as always, this is just an advisory committee. There will be no decisions made, just recommendations to the council.
Are there any public comment cards?
I have none.
Okay. We'll move to our agenda item 1, amending of fiscal year ending 2021-2022 budget. Let's see, we have a packet. Are you starting from the first page of the packet, Ms. Rakowski?
The first page should be, or there's two budgets that are in front of you that we're requesting amendments for last fiscal year. We have 60 days after the fiscal year closes to amend it, so these are some true-ups. Just in the community redevelopment agency budget and then in general fund to reflect some of those changes and some additionals that happened last year.
Are you going to go through the changes?
Yes, I'll go through the changes. And so the first budget that we'll talk about is the CRA. It has the most changes and it's the shortest. So with that being said, given the new regulations that's on our CRA audit, we have been working with Brad and Rebecca on what this looks like. And a budget is generally what we're going to budget for, and sometimes you fall short and sometimes you're a little bit over. Within the agency, it appears that the regulations state that we have to be almost exact, and so that's why we waited until after the fiscal year closed. And so I'm requesting that we amend the budget as real numbers that we have.
These are actuals.
These are actuals. So with that being said, the first amendment is going to be the city increment, our portion that we pay out of general fund into the agency. It was budgeted at $27,000 last year. The county went through a tax increase or a millage increase, and so that bumped up what that has an effect on what we pay into our agency based on what they collect. Our real number is $32,792.14. So we have an amendment amount of $57,92.14. The county's funding, the county's portion of that was $82,000, bumped up from the guesstimate of $60,000 for an increase of $22,000.
That's a nice little bump.
Yep.
Don't mind it. Now it puts us into a different audit category. So there's pros and cons with everything, but I'll take the cons of the audit category over the funding that's coming in. The next budget or the next amendment that we'll see is the $87,414.86 from RTP reimbursement. That is both the state and the county's reimbursement for our Rails to Trails grant that we were awarded. The state funding came in late this past fiscal year that we just closed out, and then the county funding came in just as we closed out last year's budget. So we accepted it into general fund last year and then moved it into CRA this year. So the combined total of the $87,000 and change covers what we spent for our Rails to Trails. A decrease in carry forward because we anticipated those funds to be in last fiscal year when we budgeted it already. So we had $18,000 to move forward with. And then our interest changed down from $200, and that was just a guesstimate based on the rates that we had from the previous year. And then so that goes through all of our income or revenue. Our expenses are adjusted accordingly. We'll see uptick in membership dues because we have additional membership dues now with the Rails to Trails and some other items that we pay for out of the agency. Our audit fees were approved early on this year. That went up. We had $3,000 that were committed to the EDC, not the $2,000. SBDC, I believe, is now absorbed through the.
Can we go back to the Clay County EDC?
Sure.
When did we approve that, going up to 3,000?
So it was a contracted amount that was approved. It was originally 1,000.
Yes.
And then it's a yearly increment up to $5,000 that was approved several years ago.
And obviously, we want to look at that contract at some point before it renews and whether there's great benefit in participating.
Sure, it's a 5-year contract, so that'll be coming up. We will be billed $4,000 this coming year, and then next year it'll come back up.
Okay.
SBDC has been absorbed through the Clay County Chamber of Commerce, is my understanding. They have not billed us. Our events and our security, these are actual numbers. We budgeted up to $1,500 per event for safety and security. Some of those change depending on what deputies they get. Seasonal decorations, we had $2,000 or $2,600 that we did not spend. The tree and the banners are carried over into this year, so we'll clean that up. This is all money that will be carried forward to this coming year.
And then we budgeted another $15,000 this year, did we not?
Yes, that's correct. The next big line item was the $50,000 that we budgeted towards grants. It took a lot longer than anticipated to receive funding back from the RTP. So I've got GRMP, which we'll talk about that in our general council meeting, but they're working on moving forward with that. We've got a pretty good team established now through all of their changes, and you'll meet them in November.
Okay.
The streetscapes, we paid $24,000 to go through the final plan. We have plans moving forward that DRMP will inform the agency on as far as spending, so that money will be rolled over into our carry forward for this year and then allocated towards projects. And that's everything. We have a budget carry forward of about $144,000 now, thanks to the RTP grants that were reimbursed, and then some of the projects that we weren't able because we were waiting on funding. So if there are any questions or anything else I can go into further detail on.
I don't have any.
No, I feel like we're in a really good position in this account.
So we're doing really well. Their biggest the biggest thing that we're going to be working through this year is now that we've gotten that audit, the first audit of the new regulations, is making sure that this is sufficient enough for what we see. And I'll be honest with you, I believe that we'll see a couple of years of moving forward through that until we get it exactly right, just because as our auditor is learning those new regulations, there'll be new things that we need to put
Adjust.
in there. Right now, everybody seems pretty comfortable on how this is laid out in the verbiage, that, such as carry forward was the line item.
So you could read it as a layperson and know that that money is moving into
Right.
the coming budget year.
I made the assumption that carry forward was appropriate last year, but we needed a little bit more detail of carry forward for next year's projects.
For next fiscal year projects.
Yes. So
Okay.
I believe that we'll still have some growing pains with the new audit regulations, but I think that we're in a good place to move forward.
Have you come to terms with between Rebecca and the auditor, who's going to be doing what pieces of the puzzle?
Yes, we have. And so the funding piece of it, our portion of it, is not going to change. It's going to be the cost regardless on which way we go. However, I believe that through the conversations of both our auditor and our CPA, that there's a good solid checks and balances and understanding of roles. And so hopefully we won't have any more conversations of the CPA should really be overseeing this.
Mhm.
It's a clear understanding to move forward.
Who's doing what?
Again, this year is going to be a transition year, so I anticipate that we'll see a couple of those bumps in the road, but I believe that we'll be in a really solid place moving forward into next fiscal audit.
Yeah. Okay. Where do you want to go now?
Okay, next is general fund. So we put in The first section, I'll take it by sections. The first section of taxes, the difference, the proposed budget, these are actual numbers that we're bringing in.
Do you know why it was less?
Do I know why?
Why it was $1,700 less than the budget on the CCUA tax? That would be line.
Oh, because they were solid round numbers, so it could have been that somebody had moved or they weren't collecting a bill. The different allocations, water conservation, with it being that low, it's not a horrible expense.
Okay.
Deficit. I will say our property taxes were budgeted at 95%. This is what 100% of our revenue looks like, and then any additional sales, less homesteaded that may have happened over the past fiscal year. Gas tax. Gas prices have a good portion to do with that. So we feel these taxes everywhere that we go.
Well, nice facility rentals.
So again, this is, I can't stress it enough, that first section is why it's very, very important, and where you purchase by your items, our items, is because it comes back to that county that that it came from, such as the gas tax, sales tax, things of that nature. Moving down, the next big adjustment that we'll see in income is going to be the FDOT reimbursement, halfway down the page, 350601.
Yes.
The increase of $4,700, that was a contract that was amended, and the budget number wasn't carried over.
So the budget should have been at around,
So we'll have about $13,000 that we'll be collecting this year.
and what does our budget this year show? Does it show 13? I can't remember. Does it reflect the increase?
It did reflect the increase.
Okay.
The next one is facility rentals. So we budget $3,000, which is more than what we generally get. And surprisingly enough, our facility, I mean, the increase, the concerns, conversations that we had at the beginning when we went through the pavilion renovation doesn't seem to have any mind to it. So we're doing good things with our pavilion rentals. That's a conversation that I'm going to bring forward to the council in November too, is to look at offering our nonprofits the same as we offer our government agencies. To our government agencies don't pay to use the facility. We want them here, and we're making enough revenue to cover the costs to keep
Them
our
using the
lights on,
facilities.
that I think that we would want our nonprofits to be in our civic organizations to utilize that to more of a community center type atmosphere.
Okay.
That is the adjustments for our revenue.
It was just that little bit of decrease under the CCUA tax. Right?
Yeah, the less than $2,000. With that being said, we gained $28,000 in electric bill, which we all felt as well.
Yeah.
A lot. Page 2, our first conversation is going to be planning. We didn't utilize the $20,000 in planning. We received that grant this year, but all of our planning from Manley Design was utilized in our CRA for the streetscapes. Next is going to be insurance liability. So we are, it's an interesting billing cycle on how they do. With the $17,000, we're billed $35,000 a year, but it depends on when they bill that last one, if it falls into which fiscal year. And so this year, we'll see it in this current fiscal year as opposed to last fiscal year. So that item will more than likely be added onto that insurance cost next year.
So you saved $1,000 in supplies?
Yes.
And
And then
that's-
again, with building maintenance, $2,000 with events. Our events are starting to become self-sufficient as we charge fees. $7,000 with staff, just through staff changes and things that have happened internally, that's inside staff. Is there any pages on page 2, or any conversation questions on page 2?
Nope.
Page 3, we have a $7,000 decrease in workman's compensation, which is always a good thing. We did not have a claim this year. We have a $6,000 increase to our city attorney budget, and that was an oversight on my part. I budgeted only $60,000 in our general fund, and then other funds made up that difference. And so his contract hasn't changed, but they are moved into general fund from the cemetery and the CRA, and we pay him completely out of CRA instead of
Okay.
cutting him a check.
So this is reflecting the total.
So this is reflecting the total, and we see that it brought in through our income
Okay.
and our transfers. Our next is almost just the past halfway down, the $46,000 internal services for CRA reimbursement from general fund. That is the $46,000 that we were reimbursed for our RTP grant, and we saw that come in to the agency. And so it left the general fund from the county and then came in through the agency. We had a $4,000 increase in safety and security. That has a lot to do with what New River Technologies and some of their enhancements have on all of our material within Public Works and the beaches and ours in-house here. Our telephone and internet, we've added some services there, and then a bill increase just through Comcast. We passed our new customer phase of 5 years with them, with our internet services. So we saw that increase, and we've negotiated that down just a little bit and changed some of our services. Next is the utility, the streetlights. Obviously, we've seen that cost ourselves. So we have to pay utility fees as well for all of our streetlights. Gas and oil has doubled. We took that number of kind of an estimate based on what we've seen the previous years. It's been a long time since we've seen gas prices this high.
Surely reflected in that budget item.
I'm sorry?
It's certainly reflected. I mean, the real world is happening
Right.
on the page.
And you look at some of the comparisons of where we were a couple of years ago, previous from COVID, where we are now, it's about spot on from where we are at a budgetary standpoint. The next large budget amendment is going to be the Community Redevelopment Agency. It's just money that we owe the agency from general fund. That's true numbers. Credit card fees, we collect fees within the payments, that those are reflected in our revenue stream, but we also have to pay the $2.50 out per transaction.
Do we allow for that in this year's budget?
I'm sorry?
Did we allow for the credit card fees in this year's budget?
Yes, we weren't entirely sure, with it being one of our first years of not being affected by COVID, on what that was going to look like now that we've started facilitating rentals and things like that again.
Right?
So now we have a number of what we'll see.
Starting point.
Yep. And then we added a line, we've got the $2,000 for the Northeast Florida League of Cities. This has been always there, but it's been taken care of differently through bookkeeping. As we bring in the money from our sponsors, then it goes out through the same line item, and it turns out to be a wash. This year it was reflected differently when Ms. Gibbs came in and set all this up. So we do have that line item. It's always been there. It's just looked differently throughout different budgets. But that's paying for all of our people, all of our committees, members and whatnot, and
To
then
go.
anything
Mhm.
additional that we might have and associated with it.
You know, going to all these meetings, and we have a lot of volunteers, but we're about the only city that does that.
Really?
Yes. I mean, I was at St. Augustine Beach for the Northeast Florida League the other night, and they had staff. A few of their staff was there, but other than that, there was no committee.
No employees.
No employees, no committee. Well, I mean, they had employees there, they were staff, but they were like, ones that run departments and
Yeah.
stuff like that, so.
So, and that is an interesting conversation, one that we'll have when it gets closer to the event. But we are one of the largest attended Florida League of Cities events, but a lot of that is our own.
Yeah.
So it's something that, you know, if we'll talk early on in the year, if that's a transition that council feels that they want to make to where we're not funding all of our organizations to go, or if it's something that they will fund throughout their own budget, or if we'll continue to do so.
Well.
I'd rather show up big.
Yeah, my opinion is these guys volunteer, and we're fortunate to have them volunteer. And it might be something, if we can afford it, to continue to do it, so.
It's definitely a nice venue.
It is.
And it's talked about throughout when you go to other League of Cities dinners, is how much Keystone Heights shows up to its own, because we do try to take care of our volunteers and, you know, treat them to a nice
Yeah.
dinner
Sure.
and a nice venue.
And
So
we've done that for many,
There's-
many years.
there's benefit to it. But we'll look at that as it moves closer. Betsy actually brought that to my attention. $2,000, equipment and maintenance and parks. And as we adjust it through the budget this year, that's one of we have equipment costs that come from our parks, and then with separating out parks from the other departments now, felt it necessary to bill parks for some of the equipment maintenance. The next large adjustment that you'll see is the American Rescue Plan, or the CARES Act funding. And so we're working with, Rebecca, I almost called her Patricia, on cleaning this up. But we spent $384,906 this year through some of our pavilion renovations, or our food distribution renovations, continuing on with those, plus the water sewer feasibility study at the airport.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the, I'm sorry, let me flip that. We brought in $384,900, and then we've spent $477,000 of what we accumulated last year into the feasibility study and our parks renovations and things of that nature.
So is all that gone?
No. And we'll do come the first of the year. Once we have an introduction with DRP, we'll look at what that funding is, and then plan for the next 4 years. We have 4 years to
To
spend
spend the
it.
rest of it?
Yes.
Do you have a number? Was this,
We've got north of $300,000 now.
okay,
So.
awesome.
So those are the budget amendments. I apologize that we couldn't do this Friday, but Friday was easy. Wednesday. Are there any questions, comments, concerns?
No?
It's just basically chewing up.
I like how this is done, the layout. I mean, it's a heck of a lot easier to read than what it was 20 years ago.
Well, and you've seen it a
And you
lot more
can,
times, and
yeah.
you know the story,
A lot easier to read.
right? I don't have any other questions. So moving forward to the next meeting, you're going to propose the amendments that you just showed us.
Right, and we'll go through them. I won't go through them in such detail, but I will go through them for the rest of council so that they do understand,
Right,
and that'll be part of the hearing.
okay. All right, is there any specific verbiage for this hearing, since it's an amendment?
It is just an amendment, so with that being said, it's just like any other public hearing. You'll open it up to public, or read it by title.
Yeah.
Open it up to public comment, and then we'll go through the budget.
Okay.
And for any questions.
Okay. You have any other questions, Tony, before we go to the order?
Nope.
All right, if not, I'll adjourn the meeting.